In this video, I show you 7 easy and delicious recipes using simple pantry staples. You'll get step-by-step guidance to each recipe and a recipe card you can screenshot to save for later. Oh, and in my kitchen, we keep it low pressure and fun. My kids are often involved, and of course, there are a few messes along the way.
Hey, Hosanna, what happened to your lips?
I got them all blueberry.
Oh.
The 7 recipes I teach you are no-knead bread, biscuits, rolls, another easy bread in the mixer, easy pie crust, berry muffins, and homemade crackers. You're going to love these favorite recipes that we bake week in and week out to feed our family. Let's get started. Today I am showing you a 5-step, 5-ingredient Italian bread recipe that literally takes just 1 hour to make, start to finish. Our family devours this bread, and we kind of have a saying around here that
Bread of life.
So we think you're going to love this quick bread recipe. As a busy mom of 4, I am always looking for recipes that are fast, because let's be honest, who has time to let your bread rise for 6 hours?
Ain't nobody got time for that.
I mix up this Italian bread in 15 minutes, let it rise for 20, and then bake it for 25 minutes. We love eating it when it's hot and fresh. Hot! Watch till the end for an easy recipe to screenshot that you can save for later. So without further ado, here are the 5 ingredients that you are going to need. Water, yeast, honey, salt, and flour. Step 1, activate your yeast. Combine 1½ cups of warm water with 1 tablespoon of honey and 1 tablespoon of active dry yeast, or 1 packet. Warm water and sugar are key for yeast activation. The yeast is dehydrated and needs to reactivate in the water, and the sugar acts as a fuel for the yeast. I know sourdough is a huge fad right now, but in my opinion, baking with yeast is so much quicker, reliable, and doesn't take a ton of forethought. Of course, making sure your yeast is active is very important, so here are a few things you want to look for. Bubbles. When your yeast is active, you will see it become bubbly and foamy after a few minutes. If your water stays flat or everything sinks to the bottom and doesn't change, then it's likely dead or inactive. Smell. An active yeast is going to have a strong, pungent smell when it begins to bubble. You want to be able to smell it. If there's no smell, it's probably a goner. In all, activating your yeast will take about 5 minutes, and then you'll be ready to move on to step 2. Step 2, mix in your flour and salt. Add 1½ teaspoons of salt and 4 cups of flour to your water and yeast mixture. Today, I had my littlest baking assistant holding my teaspoon until I needed it. For the flour, I like to start with 3 cups and mix well with a fork, and then add 1 more cup and switch to using my hands to pull the dough together. You want the dough to not be too sticky to handle. All of this mixing to get the flour incorporated will be enough, and no extra kneading or use of a stand mixer is required. Step 3, form the loaf. I usually start to form the dough into a loaf in my bowl and then set it on a baking sheet to finish shaping it. It usually takes just a few pats, tucks, and folds to get it all into a long, narrow loaf shape. I want to encourage you that it doesn't have to be Pinterest perfect. This recipe is easy and forgiving, and no matter how it ends up looking, it will be delicious. Step 4, let the bread rise. While the bread is rising, you can leave it uncovered or you can cover it. I let it rise for about 20 minutes, or sometimes just however long it takes for my oven to preheat to 350 degrees. And then it's time to pop it in the oven. Step 5, bake for 25 minutes at 350 degrees or until golden brown. Wow, look at the timing. 6 seconds left. When it's finished, take it out and enjoy with lots of butter. I like to bake this bread when I'm making chicken and rice soup or French onion meatballs. It's crusty on the outside and soft on the inside and so delicious. I'm excited about this bread knife. I only had like an old, not very sharp knife that I think we had since Blake and I got married. So I finally bought a new one and I'm very happy about it. And it'll be my first time to try it out and see how it cuts. As a busy mom, I love that I can make this bread in just 1 hour, which means I don't have to plan super far ahead in order to have amazing bread for my family and friends to enjoy. And if you don't have a whole hour to make bread, you're going to love my quick biscuit recipe that can be made from start to finish in just 15 minutes, making it a perfect side dish or fast breakfast. Thanks for watching. Pause here for the recipe so you can screenshot it and then go make some delicious bread.
Bread is life.
Today we're making 15-minute, 5-ingredient biscuits. They are delicious, fluffy, and easy to make. In fact, they're so easy, I even let my 6-year-old make them all by himself. So trust me, anyone can do this. We love to eat these with honey or jam, but my kids can never choose just one, and usually end up with both. I've been making these easy, fluffy biscuits for years. They're super delicious, super easy, and I love that they don't have any of the extra ingredients that you get from store-bought in a can. I'm a busy mom just doing my best to feed my family and keep up with all the dishes, so a quick recipe like this is a lifesaver. This recipe mixes up in 5 minutes, which is sometimes about how long it takes to get those tricky cans open, am I right? And then it bakes in 10, which means you can have a last-minute breakfast option or side for something like chili in just 15 minutes. Watch till the end and I will have a recipe that you can screenshot and save for later. Your 5 ingredients are all-purpose flour, baking powder, salt, butter, and milk. A little note about the baking powder and the salt. I like to use an aluminum-free baking powder like this for health reasons. And I usually can't find it at my Walmart, so I get it online. And then for the salt, I like to use this Redmond extra fine salt. I think it's nice just to know, okay, even with the salt I'm putting in, it has a little bit of minerals, a little bit of health to add to what I'm making. I'll post a link to these in the description below, but for now, let's get started baking. Step 1. Measure 4 cups of flour into your bowl. Biscuits are very forgiving, so don't stress about weighing and fluffing and scooping exactly. Step 2. Add 2 tablespoons of baking powder and 2 teaspoons of salt and mix well. Step 3. Chop, blend, or mix 2/3 cups of butter into the flour. Any temperature of butter will work for this recipe, but it's easier to work with soft butter, so you'll either want to chop it up if it's cold or soften it slightly. Here's a tip to quickly soften butter without a microwave. Fill a tall glass with boiling or very hot water for a few minutes. Then dump the water out and place over the top of a stick of butter that is standing up on end. Let it sit for a couple of minutes and then check. A little bit longer. The heat from the cup will soften it evenly. And here's where my favorite kitchen tool comes in, the pastry blender. It's great for cutting the butter and incorporating it into the flour. But if you only have a fork, that also works too. These are too big. This looks right. Step 4. Add 1 1/3 cups of milk to the flour and mix well with a fork. After a bit, I usually switch to using my hands to bring it all together. Step 5. Flour your working surface and spread out your dough. You won't need a rolling pin for this. Just squish down the dough with your hands until it's even and about the height you are looking for. The thinner the biscuits, the more you will make, but they won't turn out as tall, obviously. I like to keep them about an inch high. Step 6. Cut out your biscuits with a biscuit cutter, a circle cookie cutter, or even the open part of a jar or cup. Pretty much anything will work here as long as it's round. Step 7. Place on a tray and bake at 400 degrees for 8 to 10 minutes. And step 8 might go without saying, but devour and enjoy. We love loading them up with butter, jam, honey, or all of the above. I hope you enjoy this 15-minute, 5-ingredient biscuit recipe. They're easy to make, fluffy, and delicious. They're such a quick option for breakfasts and sides. Pause now to screenshot the recipe. Stay tuned for my family's favorite holiday dinner rolls. They're fun to make and so delicious. If you're looking for an easy and quick dinner roll recipe, you've come to the right place. This recipe mixes up in just 15 minutes and only requires 6 ingredients. Every year, my family looks forward to holiday baking, and we love these incredibly easy dinner rolls. It's a beloved tradition for all the kids to gather around for rolling out rolls, and my kids love to take part. My family's traditional recipe requires overnight rising.
Oh no.
But with 4 kids and lots to do, I have switched to a faster recipe. I'll be showing you step by step so that even if you've never made rolls before, it will be super easy. Stick around to the end for a recipe that you can screenshot and save for later. You will mix these up in 15 minutes. Let the dough rise for 30 minutes. Roll out and rise again for another 30 minutes. And bake for less than 10 minutes. That means in just an hour and a half, you can have delicious rolls for your holiday meals. The ingredients you need are milk, butter, honey, yeast, salt, and all-purpose flour. Step 1. Warm and combine the milk and butter. Warm 1 cup of milk and melt half a cup of butter and combine into a mixing bowl. The milk needs to be warm enough to activate the yeast, but not super hot to the touch. I find melting the butter separately and mixing it in is best. Step 2. Activate the yeast. Mix in 1 tablespoon of honey. I hate to get my tablespoon messy, so I just dump it in and eyeball it. You can too. And 1 tablespoon of active dry yeast. The sugar will help to activate the yeast. Look for foamy bubbles to know if it is ready. This usually takes a few minutes, so be patient. There's a little bit of foamy bubble here. I think when there's butter mixed in, it doesn't show up as much on the top, but I can tell that it has activated. Step 3. Mix in the flour and salt. Add 3 cups of flour and 1.5 teaspoons of salt into the milk and mix with a fork. I like to add the flour slowly until it is no longer sticky when I switch to mixing it with my hands. This is too sticky. This is with 3 cups, so I'm going to add a little bit more. You could use a stand mixer now to knead the dough if you want, but I find that just a few minutes of kneading by hand is all it takes. I wanted to show just some easy way to knead your dough.
Yeah.
Basically just working on folding different directions and kind of just bringing it all into a ball, folding over using the palm of your hand. You can turn it and fold, turn and fold. You just keep kneading it maybe 3 minutes until it starts to be stretchy. Step 4. Let the dough rise for 30 minutes. A quick rise here will go a long way to helping these rolls be fluffy at the end. Step 5. Punch down your dough and split into 2 sections. Step 6. Flour your working surface and roll out your rolls. This is a really fun step and perfect for getting the whole family involved.
I think I want to
Roll the dough out into a circle and then gently using a sharp knife, cut it into triangles. Don't sweat it if fractions and measuring aren't your strong suit. They're definitely not mine. I sometimes end up with skinny ones and fat ones, but they all taste amazing in the end. So starting at the long end, you're just kind of tucking and keeping it tight and rolling it, and then you want your little tail to tuck under the bottom.
Who rolled that one?
Me.
So we can do that at the end.
Kind of easy.
Step 7. Let rise again for 20 to 30 minutes. This second short rise can take place just before you bake. This means that if you want to prep your dough early, the rolls can be stored in the fridge until later and set out about 30 minutes before you want them ready. Step 8. Bake for 6 to 8 minutes at 350 degrees. These bake fairly quickly, so check early to be sure they don't get overdone. I always have to enjoy at least one hot out of the oven, even if it kind of burns my mouth. Whew, a little hot. We serve these up with our Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners, but they could be a perfect addition to any dinner parties or family events.
Butter is life.
As promised, here's the recipe. I'm so excited for you to try these easy holiday rolls, so get busy baking and I will see you next time. Today, I'm going to show you how to bake an easy, soft, and delicious white sandwich bread. And guess what? It doesn't take hours and hours to make. Stick around to the end for a recipe that you can screenshot to save for later. I love that this recipe is fast and only requires 6 simple kitchen staples. You need water, honey, active dry yeast, salt, olive oil, and all-purpose flour. Today I'll be teaching you how to make this bread with a stand mixer, and you can still totally knead it by hand, but it does make it go a lot faster when you're able to just turn it on and let it knead in the mixer. Step 1. Warm the water and activate the yeast. Warm 2 cups of water and pour into a stand mixer. Add a 1/4 cup of honey and 1 tablespoon or 1 packet of active dry yeast, and wait 5 minutes while the yeast activates. It's important to make sure that your yeast is active, and one quick way you can tell is just by smelling it. So if it has a pretty strong smell, it's probably still active. But you'll also know and watch as it starts to dissolve. If there starts to be bubbles, then you'll know it's active. If it looks really flat at the end, then it's probably not active anymore. So you'll notice that it's gotten kind of fluffy and cloud-like, and especially if you're watching it, it starts out flat and then like little bubbles and kind of billowy clouds start to fluff up, and that's what you're looking for.
Billowy clouds.
The billowy clouds of yeast. Step 2. Add oil and salt to the water. So I was gonna say this about the honey and I ended up not, but I don't like to always get a tablespoon sticky or the measuring cup sticky. This recipe is so easy, you don't have to measure things like honey and olive oil. I will show you, but honestly, you can just eyeball it. That's what makes it a really simple recipe, is that you really can't go wrong. Add 2 tablespoons of olive oil and 2 teaspoons of salt to the yeast mixture. Step 3. Add flour and mix the dough. Add 3 cups of flour and run the mixer on medium until the dough comes together. Add 1 more cup of flour as it continues to knead. Add an additional cup of flour if needed, if the dough is too sticky. So this is what it looks like with 4 cups of flour. After I scrape in the bit of flour that's on the sides, it's probably still gonna be a little too sticky, so I am gonna add another half cup. Let the mixer knead it on low for 5 minutes. So it's currently still kneading, and I noticed that it's not pulled away from the sides, it's still pretty wet. So I am gonna just add a little bit here and there, and you can do the same. There's probably not a way you put too much flour unless like it's so thick it's not stretchy at all, but as long as you see it moving in the mixer, you'll be good. I like to see it like this, where it's more forming a ball. So total, you're going to be using between 4 and 5 cups of flour. Step 4. Form the loaves and place in the loaf pans to rise. Alright, so to get it out of the bowl, we just want to put some more flour on it because it's very sticky. And then I like to kind of just get underneath it and keep adding a little more, putting that flour. Scrape, scrape, scrape like this. So now we got a nice jiffly ball of dough. And then we're gonna flour our working surface. Alright, right away, I'm just gonna split it into 2 different loaves. Add more flour if it feels like it's sticking to your counter. Alright, and then we're gonna form some loaves. I'm just folding it over to get a smooth top and then tucking it in underneath. Do this before you get your hands sticky, folks. Let rise for 30 minutes. Step 5. Bake at 350 degrees for 20 to 30 minutes. Step 6. Let it cool before slicing and enjoy. If you're a busy mom like me and you need a simple recipe that is quick and sure to be a hit with your family, give this one a try. I promise you'll love how it turns out. Pause here for the recipe. Thank you for baking with me today. And if you're on the hunt for some healthy homemade snacks, I have got a snack guide for you that you are going to love.
I have to cut my bread.
You're cutting your bread?
Yeah.
Have you ever wished you could bake your own delicious pie crusts but felt like the process was overwhelming and insanely time-consuming? Store-bought pie crusts can seem like an easy hack, but there's nothing like the quality and taste of a real homemade pie crust. Even if you've never made your own crust before, I want to encourage you that with this easy recipe, you really can do it, and without hardly any extra time added. So today, I'm going to teach you how I make my 3-minute, 3-ingredient pie crust recipe. And stick around till the end and I'll give you a screenshot of the recipe. And as a bonus, I will be sharing my favorite little-known kitchen tool that I think everyone should have, especially for pie crust. So first, let's talk about the 3 simple ingredients that you are going to need. All-purpose flour. I use organic, but I don't always, and so you can use whatever you have on hand. Butter is your other ingredient. I use salted. Some people are kind of finicky about salted versus unsalted, but honestly, whatever you choose, whatever's in your fridge is going to be great. You're not going to ruin this recipe. And milk. Some people like to use water in their pie crusts. My grandma and my mom have always used milk, and so that's what I use, and trust me, it is delicious. For this recipe, we'll be making a top and bottom pie crust, like what you might use for a standard size circular apple pie. I also use this to make one long pie crust to top my chicken pot pie in like a 9 by 13 pan. Step 1 is to measure 2 cups of flour into your bowl. In my kitchen, it is low pressure baking, so don't get super hung up on weighing or measuring to the tiniest degree. Just scoop your flour and shake it a little so it's not compact and so it's even on the top. You might be thinking, but what if I put too much in and then I ruin the whole batch? Don't worry. If it's too dry at the end, you can always add more milk. For step 2, you will add in a half cup of butter, and here's the secret for really flaky crusts. You want your butter to be cold straight from the fridge. Think about all the layers of a croissant for a second. All of those layers are made by butter, and in a pie crust, it is a similar thing happening. I like to chop my butter up with a sharp knife because that is going to make it easier to incorporate into the flour. All right, here is where my favorite kitchen tool comes in, the pastry blender. I would give up a lot of other kitchen items like measuring cups before I gave up this because it is so handy for making things like biscuits or pie crust. This one is by Good Cook. You can find it for less than $10 on Amazon. I will link it in the description below. So here we are. We're going to use this for our pie crust recipe today. But never fear, even if you only had your hands or a fork, you can still easily make this pie crust. This is just helpful for cutting the butter and getting it all incorporated. The pastry blender just helps us break the butter into smaller pieces and incorporate it into the flour. If you are using a fork, just mash and chop and stir. You can even use your hands. You want varying sizes of butter, nothing too huge, but also not so small that you can barely see it anymore. I'd say pea size is a good comparison. Step 3, add a half cup of milk and start mixing. It will seem dry at first, but as your butter softens, it will add more moisture and start to come together. Don't be afraid to get messy. You'll need to use your hands to get it all into a ball. If it's too dry and crumbly at this point, add a sprinkle more of milk and keep working it. That's it! Beautiful and easy pie crust, ready to go on whatever you're making. If I'm using a top and bottom crust, I'll just split it in half and roll it out into circles. My kids are always asking for a lick of dough, so when I cut off the extra scraps around the edges, there's usually little hands waiting for a taste. So as promised, here's the recipe, so pause the video now to screenshot and save for later. As I close out this video, I want to share an encouraging story that has to do with this exact recipe actually. When I was pregnant with my first child, I was at a 4th of July picnic and I brought a homemade pie crust, everything like that. And one of the moms there told me, just you wait, you will never bake like this again. And yeah, even to this day, with 4 children, I'm busy, I still love to bake and I still love to use my own homemade pie crust. I understand what it's like to have a busy life, a messy kitchen, always doing dishes, lots of interruptions, and yet I still love to bake, and I want to share that with you and share just normal mom life while I'm baking and while I am sharing recipes that will be helpful for you, that are quick, they're easy, and that your family's gonna love. Today I'm making my family's favorite yogurt berry muffins. At times, packaged snacks have been a lifesaver for me because I know what it's like to have newborn and toddlers and to be so busy and so tired. You just need to be able to hand them a snack, right? But I also have some picky eaters, and so I try to look for creative ways to add nutrition as often as I can. And for me, that looks like baking a lot of muffins and baking other snacks. These yogurt berry muffins are quick to mix up in just one bowl and can be so versatile in flavor. The only sugar comes from a little bit of honey, and the yogurt adds protein while the oats add fiber. The ingredients you need are flour, oat flour or quick oats, baking powder, baking soda, salt, cinnamon, eggs, yogurt, honey, milk, and fresh or frozen berries. Step 1. Measure dry ingredients into a large mixing bowl and stir. Into the bowl, add 2 cups of flour, 2 cups of oat flour or quick oats, 3 teaspoons of aluminum-free baking powder, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, half a teaspoon of salt, and 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Step 2. Add the wet ingredients and mix well. Mix in 2 eggs, 2 cups of Greek yogurt. You can use any kind of Greek yogurt. I get this kind from Costco, but also I like to have a whole milk option as well. This one is low fat. Both are great, add good flavor and protein. Half a cup of milk and half a cup of honey. Okay, so this is your muffin base, and I love how versatile it is because you can add anything you want to it. You could make it a lemon raspberry muffin if you wanted and add lemon juice and lemon zest. That's really good. You could put blueberries, you could put mixed berries, you could even put chocolate chips, and that would make it just a little sweet treat. So the muffin base is super easy, super simple, and then you can change it up each week depending on what you want to make. Step 3, measure the batter into each muffin tin. I usually use a 1/4 cup measuring cup. This recipe makes approximately 2 dozen muffins, which I love because I love to freeze half of the batch. Baking more today saves me time another week when I won't have the time. Step 4, stir a spoonful of berries into each muffin. Okay, so you might be wondering, why did I not put the berries in before I put them in the muffin tins? I know typically people say to toss berries in flour and then put them in. I still find that, especially if they're frozen, the color bleeds a lot. And then you don't always have an even amount of berries in each muffin. And so I like to put the batter in first, and then I just do a spoonful of whichever kind of berry I'm gonna use into each one, and then I know for sure every muffin has some berries in it, which if you have kids, you know is very important because nobody wants to miss out on the berries. You could make them all mixed berry, or some blueberry and some raspberry. Blueberry escape. You could even add chocolate chips for a sweet treat. So I usually sprinkle the berries on top first, and then I'll mix it in with a spoon. Step 5, bake for 15 minutes at 350 degrees. Check with a toothpick to make sure they're done.
On both.
Raz.
On the
This
black.
one?
Can I have 2?
Too hot?
My kids love these berry yogurt muffins, and they're a staple that we use in our house. I like to keep some in the freezer so that if there's a week I can't bake, I can just pull them out and we have a healthy snack choice available for us. Thank you for watching, and pause here for the recipe. Next up, I'll be sharing a super simple homemade cracker recipe. It's a great swap for a store-bought snack, and it just takes a handful of simple ingredients.
Hey, Hosanna, what happened to your lips?
I got them all blueberry.
Oh.
Do you want to make healthy homemade snacks but don't know where to start? As a busy mom, I know how overwhelming it can be. At times, store-bought snacks have been a lifesaver for me, but I'm also always looking for healthy swaps that I can make, and this cracker recipe is one of those. Today, I'm making simple rustic crackers. These delicious and crunchy crackers are easy to mix up in just a few minutes and only require a few simple pantry staples. My kids love a good cracker, but a lot of the store-bought ones have tons of ingredients and a lot of them I can't pronounce. And so I love making healthy snacks that are simple and that have just a few ingredients that I always have in my pantry. Stick around to the end and I'll have a recipe card that you can screenshot to save for later. The ingredients you need are flour, salt, paprika, butter, honey, water, and vanilla. Step 1. Measure flour, salt, and paprika into a mixing bowl and stir. Measure 2½ cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, and a ½ teaspoon of paprika, and mix together. Let's talk about flour for a second. I know that white flour does get a lot of hate these days, and you can totally use a whole wheat flour here for this recipe if you want. My family does like white flour, and so I've found that switching from a bleached unorganic flour to unbleached and organic really does add a more whole ingredient that's more nutritious for my family. Step 2. Blend in butter. Add in a ½ cup of room temperature butter. Using a pastry blender, if you know, you know. What is this?
A pastry blender.
A pastry blender. You know mommy loves a pastry blender, right? Okay, I say pastry, you say blender. Pastry.
Blender.
Pastry. Blender. Pastry. Blender. Cut the butter into flour and incorporate well. The butter should be in very small chunks. Step 3. Add in the honey, water, and vanilla and mix with a fork. Add 3 tablespoons of honey, give or take. You don't have to be exact. I'm just gonna eyeball it. You can measure with your heart. A ½ cup of water and a ½ teaspoon of vanilla. Switch to your hands to bring it all together once the dough is thick. Add a little more water if it is too dry or more flour if it is too sticky.
What do you taste?
Honey.
Honey?
Honey.
Step 4. Roll out and cut the crackers. Split the dough in half and roll out with a rolling pin on a floured surface, silicone mat, or parchment paper. So I found that rolling it out first and then putting it on a parchment paper tends to work better because parchment paper does slide around. But I also will put it on the parchment paper and then cut it because it's hard to transfer the individual crackers if they're cut before you put it on parchment. So I rolled it out here and I made them very thin. And the thinner you make them, the more crunchy that they will be and the more crackers that you will make. Sometimes you just have to feel around. Okay, is it a little bit thicker here? You can roll it out. Doesn't have to be perfect shape. These are rustic crackers. What are you doing?
She said hi, trick mommy.
Once on the tray, using a pizza cutter, cut 1-inch squares. One option is to cut on the parchment and then transfer the whole thing to a baking sheet, but it can be tricky. You can also cut directly on the tray, but you might need to slide the parchment around to get the sides closest to the pan edge. So next you want to poke a hole into the center of them. You could use a fork or a toothpick. My kids have these like little animal toothpicks and I like that they're a little bit bigger on the bottom, so that's what I use. Poke the center of each cracker with a toothpick or fork. Optional, sprinkle with flaky sea salt. Step 5. Bake at 350 degrees for 8 to 12 minutes. For a softer cracker, bake at 8 minutes. For a crunchier cracker, bake 10 to 12 minutes. So if you want your crackers to be on the chewier side, you could just do them for 8 minutes. My kids actually do like them chewy, but since we're going for crunchy crackers, I'm gonna start with 10 minutes, and that usually is about right, but I'll check and see. Then repeat these steps for the second half of the recipe. So you can see the edges start to get done quicker. You want to check the middle ones. These could go a little bit longer, but I also don't want to burn the edges, so I think I'll pull these out. If you find they're not crunchy enough, I would give it maybe 2 more minutes. Let them cool and store in an airtight container for up to a week. You can serve these crackers with cheese and fruit or hummus and veggies for a well-rounded snack. They're easy to take on the go, and you can change up the flavor by adding different herbs and seasonings. Pause here for the recipe. If you liked these crackers and are looking for more healthy snack recipes, make sure that you're subscribed because I've got more great recipes coming soon. So today I'm going to teach you how I make my 3-ingredient, they're very loud. Yay!
Hello. Sinking in, and it's like sinking in water to skin.
Oh!
It rhymes.
It does rhyme. When you say yeah, does that mean it's time to start talking or?
Action.